Welcome to the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility, an ongoing inquiry into American political origins and evolving institutions. The Executive Director of the Virtual Center is Dr. Bill O'Brien. He's also your host for this continuing conversation. Here he is now, Dr. Bill O'Brien.
Thank you, Bob Kincaid, and welcome to Tuesday's edition of the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility. It is Tuesday. It is the 17th day of November. And, of course, next Thursday, we know, is Thanksgiving. We are in the year 2015, and I welcome you to our second day of broadcast here this week at the Virtual Center. I want to thank you so very much for your continued support for our program and your continuing support for the Head On Radio Network. It's an important voice, and I think with some of the things going on in the world right now, that voice becomes as significant as it's ever been. I was listening this morning to some of the media on the Paris situation. There are a lot of things happening as a result of this, and much of it obviously is frightening to all of us. However, a lot of it is extremely important as well. One of the things that I was noticing this morning, for example, is that the President of France, President Hollande, has requested alterations in the French Constitution in order to deal with the threat of terrorism. And many of the alterations and constitutional changes that are being requested are classic in the sense of what happens to individual rights and individual freedoms during periods of crisis. We need to be vigilant, and we need to be careful about what we do and how far we go with it and why we do what we do. So anyway, my point is that it's more important than ever before that we make sure that different voices and different opinions are out there in the marketplace of ideas and are listened to and are considered seriously, especially now. So again, I do thank you for your continued support for Bob Kincaid and his folks at the Head On Radio Network. It's a very, very important service, and I think, and I just feel honored to be even a small part of it. I do invite you to participate actively in our program by picking up the phone and giving us a call and going on the air and sharing your thoughts, your ideas, your concerns, your suggestions, if you will, with our listening group, with our audience, with our group of participants. The phone number is area code 304-640-6495. 640-6495, area code 304. If you'd like to share your thoughts with me via email, you're a little bit reluctant to go on the air, I can understand that. My email address is waobrien906 @gmail.com. waobrien, OBRIEN 906 @gmail.com. And again, I remind you of our Facebook page. If you go to Facebook and you type in the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution, you will gain access to our Facebook page, and there are a number of issues and items there that I have posted. I believe last evening I posted a short piece on some of the issues related to what we do about terrorism and why we should or should not do it. I think it's very, very important to keep in mind that those with a political agenda are finding ways to connect their agenda to the present threat of terrorism. I think you can see it in opposition to, not just opposition, but outright criticism of the president's position, not only his position and his policies, but even going so far as his tone is becoming a matter of attention. I was particularly interested in the piece that I put on Facebook last night, related to something that I saw last evening on Fox News. My wife walked into the room, and I had Bill O'Reilly on, and she said, "Oh my God, why are you watching that?" And I made, some comment about it's really important to every once in a while to check in and make sure that you're on target with what's happening. And I was doing that. And the guest was Charles Krauthammer, that many of you know with the Washington Post. And what they were talking about, of course, is the ISIS situation, specifically, obviously, related to the terrorism in France. And Krauthammer's position was, he was basically criticizing President Obama because President Obama refused to recognize ISIS as an existential threat to our way of life, and insisted that what we were dealing with was a group of terrorists within one of the world's most reputable religions. And of course, the whole issue of the existential threat to our way of life by implication sets the stage for the battle of civilizations that we've heard so much about for so long between the world of Islam and the West. The West, of course, being the worldview of Christianity. That kind of a religious war on an international scale, I don't believe it's something we want to take on. And this idea of recognizing something as an existential threat to your way of life and then acting accordingly, I would suggest to you, lays the groundwork for a struggle where all the controls are off, all the limits are off. I compared it with the demands in World War II for unconditional surrender on the part of Japan. What something like that does is eliminate all the options short of total victory. And if you don't leave your opponents an opportunity to save a bit of face, and you demand total surrender, you demand totality in anything, it seems to me, you are limiting the possibilities of bringing any kind of a struggle to an end short of disaster. And I'm afraid that that's what we're seeing in a lot of ways. But anyway, I just wanted to make that aware. It's very, very important, it seems to me, to be aware and to stay on top of these kinds of things. And my point was, and I reiterate it because I think it's important, that those people with a political agenda are doing everything that they can do to link their agenda to the current situation and gain accordingly. And it's very, very important that we be vigilant and that we be aware of what's happening and that we, in turn, act and respond accordingly as well. In yesterday's program, we spent a bit of time in the last hour, the second hour of our program, talking specifically about higher education. And I was a little bit apologetic because I know that there are a number of listeners here at the Virtual Center who are not West Virginians, and I don't want to make this particular issue sound too West Virginia specific, because the reality is the same kinds of things go on elsewhere. But there is a situation in higher education underway right now in southern West Virginia, which is reeling under the the tremendous decline in coal, in the mining of coal, and the president's and the world's policy on limiting burning of fossil fuels in order to protect climate and all of these other things. This entire region of the state is in free fall in terms of the economies right now. We are a state that is losing population. This particular region especially is losing population. I heard a report earlier today suggesting that West Virginia is losing population at the rate of 44 people every single day. This is huge. And it's tied up, obviously, with what's happening to the region economically, especially as far as the mining of coal is concerned. In spite of the fact that West Virginia is one of our more rural states, West Virginia is blessed, and I believe I can say that advisedly. West Virginia is blessed with a number of very good, high-quality institutions of higher education. The reality is that from a perspective of per capita service, for the size of the population of West Virginia, this state has more institutions of higher education than any other state in the Union, if you look at it from on a per capita basis. There's absolutely no question that financially something is going to happen. It has to happen in order to reduce the number of institutions. However, I mentioned yesterday, and I'll reiterate here today, that there has been a move to try to reduce the number of institutions of higher education in West Virginia for some time, because most people who look at the situation realizes that a state with an economy like West Virginia's cannot continue to maintain the higher education infrastructure that West Virginia has. And here in the southern part of the state, we have a major transformation going on now because a vibrant, growing private institution that was located here in the city of Beckley, southern West Virginia, lost its accreditation and went out of business 2 years ago. And here in the middle of Beckley sits this campus. And after some time and some efforts, the state's flagship university, West Virginia University, which is in Morgantown, which is about 3 hours north of Beckley, agreed to come down here and move into southern West Virginia and bring the services of the state's major research university into the southern part of the state. And of course, this has excited community leaders and education leaders and business leaders throughout this area ever since. Well, what has happened as a result of that move is that a four-year institution, which has a tremendous reputation as a school with strong programs in engineering, West Virginia Institute of Technology, which was located in a town about 30 miles north of Beckley, named Montgomery, West Virginia, 9 or 10 years ago became affiliated with the university, with West Virginia University. And to make a long story as short as I can, West Virginia University decided to relocate West Virginia Institute of Technology, West Virginia Tech, from Montgomery to Beckley. And of course, this has the folks in Montgomery reeling, understandably. It has the people in Beckley quite excited about the fact that we're going to have the state's major flagship university with a viable campus here in southern West Virginia. However, the basic issue is that there are already 2 4-year institutions, public institutions, in this area, and both of them have off-campus programs serving Beckley, Concord University and Bluefield State College. And the major concern is what's going to happen if West Virginia University moves West Virginia Tech into Beckley and then begins to pour its limitless resources into supporting West Virginia Tech, is there a possibility that this could do serious damage to the viability of two long-standing reputable institutions, namely Bluefield State College and Concord University? That's the issue. And so throughout the planning process, which has been going on now for several months, the presidents of the various institutions, Tech, Concord, Bluefield State, and West Virginia University, have been sitting down and working theoretically on a plan to find ways to cooperate, to complement each other, so that what the region will be benefiting from will be the very best that each institution can bring to the table. And the idea is that West Virginia, with its extensive graduate and research capabilities, will bring a higher education component to the southern part of the state that it hasn't had. And when that is attached to the viability of the educational institutions that are already here, plus a growing dynamic community college in the area, the thinking is that this could be the beginnings of a major economic turnaround for the southern part of the state. But now that the issue is coming close to fruition, now that it's becoming time to lay out exactly which programs are going to come here, the issue is becoming one that is involving leaders in the political structure of West Virginia. Local representatives are coming to the fore and promising, I will vote against West Virginia University if what they are doing ends up doing damage to Concord and Bluefield State and vice versa. So all of a sudden, this issue is becoming a hot potato politically, as it were. And as I mentioned yesterday, and this is really what prompts my desire to address this issue here, because I think there are lessons here and issues here which extend well beyond West Virginia, because I think these are issues that affect higher education throughout the nation. And I think all of them are very important. For example, a member of the legislature, the new Republican majority in the legislature from the southern county in which both Concord and Bluefield State College are located, made this comment about what's going on in Beckley. John Schott said, quote, "Duplication is the major concern most people have. But at the same time, I think there are opportunities in course offerings and advanced degrees. So there's certainly room for a win-win if it's carefully supervised." He goes on, "We have had a number of conversations with West Virginia University, Concord, and the Higher Education Policy Commission, which is the governing board overseeing colleges and universities here in West Virginia. And our goal is to really come up with some agreement, some understanding of how all the institutions can work together in Beckley to complement what we have rather than compete with one another." And then the presidents of Concord and Bluefield State weighed in to this discussion. What's really causing the issue is that at present, Concord University has about 2,500 students. I believe they claim 2,550 students, 600 of whom are taking classes here on the Beckley campus. Bluefield State has about 1,500 students. That's a total then of about 4,000 students for those two institutions here in southern West Virginia. West Virginia University is promising that within 3 years, West Virginia Tech, which is moving to Beckley next year, the year after next, in 2017, within 3 years, by 2020, West Virginia Tech will have an enrollment of 3,000 students, and in 5 years, an enrollment of 5,000 students. Those numbers are really what is throwing up the red flags. Because the issue, especially to supporters of Concord and Bluefield State, the issue is, where does West Virginia Tech expect to get its enrollment, especially in a state which continues to lose population, unless it plans to raid the existing institutions for students? In other words, unless there are plans for program duplication rather than cooperation, and that what we will end up with are 3 4-year institutions competing for qualified students from the same shrinking population. One of the presidents, the president of Concord University, made the point. I want to be very, very sure that I quote this accurately. Well, I can paraphrase what the issue is. Oh yeah, here it is. The president of Concord University said, with the population in the area dropping, as well as the population of students who are graduating and choosing not to go to college at all, it will create a lot more competition in the area for students. And, quote, we will certainly have to go further away from this area to find students, unquote. And I'm familiar with this because I taught for 25 years. I was affiliated with Concord for more than 25 years. The admissions staff there has added counselors who travel further and further away from West Virginia in order to recruit students, qualified students. In other words, the institutions are going further and further away. Indeed, a close friend this year has just become an admissions counselor at West Virginia Institute of Technology, West Virginia Tech. And she had no idea when she secured the position that she would be going to Texas and California on recruiting trips in order to find qualified students for West Virginia Institute of Technology. So what we see then is that institutions are going further and further away from West Virginia in order to find adequate enrollment to sustain the institutions. And now, with Tech coming to this region, to Beckley, closer to the southern part of the state than it was before, the concern is that that will be one more competitor, one more player for the shrinking college enrollment that currently exists here. And so the region's political representatives in the state legislature are really upset. The representative that I quoted before, John Schott, made the following statement in this report. If you are asking, can they, West Virginia University, start out in 2017 without impacting the enrollments at Bluefield State and Concord University, I don't see how they can, he said. A delegate from an adjoining county served by these two institutions in the southern part of the state, Delegate Cliff Moore of McDowell County, which is the poorest county in the poorest state in the United States. McDowell County was the center of coal when coal was king 50 and 60 years ago. McDowell County now is in serious trouble. Delegate Cliff Moore said that it's very likely that West Virginia University's move to Beckley will have an adverse impact on Bluefield State College and Concord University. Quote, I think it is going to be an absolute travesty for Bluefield State and Concord eventually, said Moore, whose legislative district includes parts of McDowell and Mercer counties. I don't know how in a state where we have fewer and fewer people going to school, we're going to be successful, particularly when the president of West Virginia University is saying he wants 5,000 students by 2020. Where is he going to get the kids from? I just think it's a very aggressive, bold move by West Virginia University that doesn't have to happen. Nothing good is going to come from this, unquote. It looks like, with the legislature scheduled to come into session in January, it looks like higher education in West Virginia is in for a resumption of competition and political warfare that has existed periodically throughout the history of this particular part of the state, because of the number of institutions and the costs of maintaining those institutions. So it seems to me that the key issue will resolve around the particular programs that West Virginia Tech chooses to bring to the southern part of the state. Whether in fact they compete or whether they support and complement the programs already being offered here by the home institutions, so to speak. This is the basis of this topic, and why I felt that it relates directly to the issue of civic responsibility here in not only southern West Virginia, but that it relates specifically to the issues related to civic responsibility nationwide. There's absolutely no question about the link between economic development, quality of life, and the role that higher education plays in this. Higher education has traditionally been the avenue by which people have been able to move up in American society and live their particular version of the American dream. In a state as low on the totem pole financially as West Virginia, it seems to me that that story attains or acquires even more pertinent relevance. Here's the issue. Qualified students. The operative assumption here by all of the institutions, West Virginia University, West Virginia Tech, Concord University, Bluefield State College, and the community colleges as well, is the issue of qualified students. What all of them have found it necessary to do is hire recruiters to go further and further away in order to recruit adequate enrollment in order to sustain the institutions. In fact, some of the institutions are buying potential student lists, the names of students due to graduate from high schools around the country that haven't as yet selected a program or a major or an intended college or university. In other words, these students, these names are potentially recruitable. And these lists of prospective students are being purchased by the admissions departments in existing institutions. So in other words, if I'm the president of one of these institutions, I send out the word to my admissions director to purchase the list of prospective students. And then I put my admissions counselors to the job of dividing up this list, making the contacts with the prospective students, and seeing how many of them we can recruit to come to this region in order to attend my particular institution. There's one issue there that I think is being overlooked. Obviously, if you recruit from an enrollment list like this, you are bringing people to the region to go to school by offering them scholarship money and other draws, other incentives, if you will, to come here. Usually it's athletics. You know, naturally, usually institutions go wide and far in order to recruit athletes. We know that. Now we're talking about just students. And we're asking them to relocate and come here to go to school. So the issue is, what can you offer me that'll make it worth my while to go that far from where I live in order to go to school? So institutions are using scholarship money and other things as incentives to attract potential recruits. The reality is, however, that even if a student does agree to come here and enroll as a student, chances are that even if that student stays long enough to graduate, he or she is not going to stay here permanently. It happens in a few cases naturally. But chances are most of these prospective students, even if they do come, will leave when they finish their education. Consequently, this approach to recruitment is not doing a whole lot for the region other than bringing the potential dollars in that these recruits would bring with them. In other words, they'll buy groceries here, they'll buy gasoline here, they'll attend movies here. You know, they'll spend in the area while they're here. But beyond that, tourism does the same thing. But beyond that, they don't bring anything permanently to the region to help grow the economy, because chances are they're not going to become permanent residents. And that's only if they stay till the end. The fact of the matter is, these institutions are looking at graduation rates that rarely come close to 40%. Most of the students who enroll as freshmen, leave before they become juniors. Once they become juniors, chances are they'll stay until they graduate. But most of the so-called attrition in enrollment happens in the first 2 years. That means that while you have an influx of students coming into the institutions as freshmen, you have a large group of students leaving as freshmen and sophomores. So it becomes almost like a revolving door. where you're spending money to recruit them. They stay for a while, but then they leave because the institution doesn't meet their needs, doesn't satisfy them, they're too far from home, whatever the issue might be. The fact of the matter is, these institutions are looking at graduation rates, people that come here and complete the full 4 years, at substantially less than 40%. I know in the years that I was at Concord, we used to talk about what would be necessary in order to increase our graduation rates by 2%, 3%, going from 34% to 36%. What would that entail? How many students would we need to keep here in order to meet those targets? So the fact of the matter is, we're recruiting large numbers of people, they're not finishing, and that means the next year you have to go out and recruit a whole new group of new people who come here and don't finish. Why? What's going on? We've talked about this numerous times here at the Virtual Center over the months and years now that we've been doing these programs. What seems to be the operative assumption here that is at play? It seems to me that a major issue in this is the issue of academic quality. Let me be more specific. What our institutions of higher education are looking for are qualified young people who can come here and are well enough prepared to handle the rigors of quality higher education. And the people who can do that are becoming fewer and fewer. I think the test scores, the standardized tests that our K through 12 institutions have been exposed to over the years are revealing those realities. The fact that the numbers of students who even register as proficient, let alone as good or excellent, those numbers are declining. Our college-ready population is going down, which means that you have to recruit more in order to maintain enrollment stability. What's going on? We are losing more students than we're educating. I don't know how else to say it. Why? It seems to me that the issue here, the operative assumption that seems to be driving all of this, is the same assumption that has driven education in America since the very beginning. We are not in the business of educating everybody. We are in the business of recruiting talent, of finding the skills, finding the most capable students, and extracting them from the masses. And as Jefferson said, the residue is being dismissed. We can't afford to do that anymore. We have got to begin to educate all of our people, not just some, not just a few, but everybody. And what that requires is a totally new approach, a totally new philosophy in our education enterprises. We have got to concentrate on individual students as individuals. We have got to find out what these students are good at. And we have got to do everything we can do to help them develop and streamline and hone and sharpen their skills and their talents. It's based on one major assumption. I have to acknowledge that I have this assumption. And that is that everybody can do something well. All of us have something to contribute. Our job as educators is to find out what that something is and do everything we can do to help develop it, not only for the benefit of the individual student, but to the benefit of the communities and the regions in which they live. Nowhere is that more at play than it is here in southern West Virginia. We have got to reverse the process of dismissing scores of our people because they don't meet muster. They don't stack up. They're not competitive. They're not capable or qualified of doing college-level work. We are hiring in our institutions the most qualified, intelligent, skilled research and academic professionals we can find. But the problem is we're unable to find enough qualified students to sustain the numbers of faculty members we have in the numbers of institutions we have. What's the answer? It seems to me that the answer is we've got to begin to set out to educate everybody. We have to look at a class and make it our goal that every one of these students will pass. I won't allow any of these students in this class to fail. If it means staying after class, if it means extra sessions, if it means extra hours of instruction, if it means extra assignments, whatever it might mean, we've got to stop failing our students. We've got to stop throwing them onto the heap that Jefferson called residue. What am I saying here in southern West Virginia? I'm saying that there are plenty of prospective potential students here in southern West Virginia. West Virginia has the smallest, lowest college-going rate of any state in the Union. One of our counties, one of our coal counties, boasts the following numbers. Fewer than half of working adults in this county have graduated from high school. Not college, high school. We have in this region potentially the most lucrative source of student enrollment. We don't have to go outside in search of it. We've got it here. We just need to service it. We need to develop it. We need to come up with ways to find out where students are and pick them up and take them from that level to the level they need in order to meet college level qualifications. In a word, we need to grow our own. We need to begin to serve the adults, the unemployed adults, the underemployed adults in this region, to the point that all of them find out where their skills are. And then we need to do whatever we can do to help them develop those skills.
Hey, Bill?
Yes, Bob.
May I ask a question, please?
You certainly may.
Do we have any numbers on, first of all, the number you just put out, did you just say half of the unemployed people in Raleigh County?
No, I didn't say Raleigh. The county I meant is Mingo.
Oh, Mingo, yeah. But half of them aren't even high school diplomas.
High school 50%, less than 50% of the working adults.
Oh, working adults. Okay.
Working adults in Mingo County do not have high school diplomas.
I hear something like that, and I'm terrified.
It's frightening. It's frightening. We have allowed our people, our kids, not only that, but this idea that college is not worth it. It's become so expensive. Of course it's not worth it here because we've never needed it. There's always been the mines.
Well, sure, but I guess where I was going is when you see numbers like that and you say, we've got to find a way to educate and serve these people, I agree wholeheartedly. But knowing what we know about our population and knowing what we know about, say, the toxins to which they have been subjected very likely from when they were in the womb to present, what role does isn't there some place or isn't there some necessity for ascertaining levels of learning disability as well? I mean,
yes.
Don't you think that we also have to presume that within the parameters of what you're discussing?
Yes. Yeah, we've got to, and that there's no question that that's there, Bob. We've got to take that in consideration, and we're going to have to deal with it. And we're going to have to deal with the results of it because we live, the population we're talking about is among the most unhealthy populations in the nation. And we're going to have to deal with that. We're going to have to deal with learning disabilities. But there's absolutely no question. But we can't continue to just throw away potential talent because they don't meet the qualifications. We've been using standardized tests in order to identify the talented. What we've got to do is begin to use standardized tests to identify the qualified. And what I mean
is...
The capable. And what we're saying is we'll do whatever kind of intervention programming we need to do in order to bring people up to the level of their potential, whatever that might be. And then if the institutions want, we'll test them. I'm betting that if we do that, many of these people will be able to meet qualifications for admission into our colleges and universities.
Well, for instance, something...
They need us to bring it.
Absolutely. So when we're talking about the difference between capable and desirable, I guess, for lack of a better term, what are we talking about in, say, because you know far more about literacy issues than I do. What are we talking about in terms of, say, an ACT or SAT range? And moreover, how do you design a curriculum that takes into account that people are probably laboring under rather severe deficits of instruction from jump?
What we have, it seems to me, when you talk about ACT levels, and I'm a little bit familiar with that. Most of the institutions, and I know the one I was affiliated with, students, in order to be admitted as a full-time student, you had to have a composite ACT score of 21. Well, the average ACT score of graduating high school seniors in West Virginia is 20.6 or something like that. So what that means is the average graduate of high school in West Virginia needs developmental work in English and reading, or in mathematics, or in a combination of those. So almost every, and again, other than the superstars, the ones that get the scholarships and stuff, they're the ones that get in. I mean, we have a number of students who will apply that, will have an ACT score combined of 26 or 27. That's a full scholarship.
Yeah, somebody's getting a ride on numbers like that.
Right.
I guess what I'm asking is, how do you design a curriculum when if I sound elitist, I don't mean to, or any sort of snobbery, I'm not engaging in it. But how do you design a higher education curriculum for people in which your most optimistic standard is probably 10th grade level learning or less?
First of all,
do I have it dead wrong?
No, you don't have it dead wrong. I think we have to realize that there are people that no matter what you do, their potential is limited. There's no question. We know that. But what we also know is that there are a lot of people out there with absolutely unlimited potential that we haven't found a way to touch. We haven't found a way to tap into. And the fact of the matter is we don't even try, because we administer these standardized tests like the ACT, and we let the numbers make the decisions for us. And what I've seen, for example, is if we're looking for a composite score of 21 on the ACT, for example, we're like at Concord, I know, and I'm not attacking them. I'm kind of supportive of this. But they have what they call a cutoff of 17. And so the assumption is that if you score less than 17 in math or literature, languages and literature or whatever, on the ACT, on the English part or on the math part, then you must take a developmental class in that particular area, and you must pass it before you're admitted to college-level English or college-level math. Well, the fact of the matter is the numbers of students entering college in West Virginia that are required to take developmental classes is up there like 40-45%. In other words, colleges are doing a lot of the instruction, a lot of the teaching that college people claim should be happening in our K through 12 schools, but for some reason isn't happening. But the fact of the matter is, it seems to me, Bob, that what we've got to do, even though we recognize that there are limitations, there are learning disability limitations, there are a lot of limitations, but what we've got to do is concentrate on moving individual students one at a time as far as we can move them. And it is my belief that if we commit an education system to that goal, we will find a lot of people that we have rendered uneducable as meeting our qualifications. I keep thinking of, I know you've probably seen it, many people have, I've seen it several times, the movie Blind Side with Sandra Bullock that received the...
Sure.
It's about Michael Orr, the guy that the offensive line, the defensive lineman for, I think, Baltimore Ravens. And there's a point in there where she goes to check on his ACT, on his college admission scores. And he's testing down at 6%, 18%, and all of that. And then they say, but in one category, he tests at the 98th percentile. And that's his desire to support or protect people, to help people. And that's a strength. And so the question is, can you fashion an education program for that student that takes advantages of the strength, does not punish for the weaknesses? And what I'm talking about here is a 180-degree reversal in priorities in terms of what we look for. This morning, and I think I mentioned this to you, Bob, before we went on the air today, I submitted a piece to our local paper. I don't know whether it'll be published or not, but anyway, I wrote it. I'm probably this evening, I'll probably post it on Facebook, on our Facebook page at the Virtual Center. Basically, the point I made was, if you read this account of the higher education struggles going on in southern West Virginia right now, the one foundational assumption that drives the entire conversation is that the priorities are the institutions involved, not the students. In other words, the goal of these institutions is to sustain the institutions, not serve people, not serve the region. And the fact that institutions are buying prospective enrollment lists and going out and recruiting potential students that they know are not going to stay here, indicates that their priority is to maintain the institution, not strengthen the economy of the region, not bring educational quality to the region.
And the two can be mutually exclusive.
Right.
They don't have to be, but it seems that they are.
It seems that they are. And so what that means is that if your priority is the institution, rather than the students it serves, then that drives how you recruit or how you accept or admit students. You want the best. You compete for the best. You offer scholarships to the particular students you want. You buy the talent that you want, those that you believe will bring prestige and credibility to your institution. In other words, it's all institutionally driven. The fact of the matter is, we need institutions that concentrate on educating people, on upgrading the quality of life of entire regions that these institutions are in. That's the change that has to take place. And the point that I made this morning is, it doesn't matter how many institutions we have here. If they're all competing for the same qualified students, then they all agree on one thing, namely, the bulk of the people here that need education, they are not going to serve.
They're not worth it?
None of them.
I mean, I don't want. But I mean, aren't they saying it's not that they're not going to serve it? They don't deem them to be worth it.
Well, they don't. No, they don't. In other words, they're buying into the assumptions that drive the assumption that has driven education, which is basically that only a few are qualified to meet our high standards. Our job is to find the qualified, not help people qualify. My position is that if we find these people and we develop individualized programs to bring these people up to where they need to be and strengthen their skills, and then we test them and basically we're testing them, say, does this person now meet your admission standards? If they don't, then we go back to work.
Give them a fighting chance.
Give them a chance. You don't lower your standards. You can't afford to do that. We need higher standards than everybody because we got further to go. We need the best qualified people we can get. We don't have people walking around with pieces of paper saying that they're educated who can't do anything or don't know anything. We need the highest standards possible, but we've got to turn our education institution toward the development of that talent, not throwing it away. And that's what it seems to me that's what we're doing, and that's what we've always done. And there are ways to do this. We know how to do it. We've got the best. You know, the irony is, it seems to be a negative that per capita West Virginia has more higher education institutions than any other state in the Union. on the surface, that's a negative. But think of what it means if you turn all of that educational talent toward the development of the population we have. We potentially have the capability of turning more lives around than most places.
And isn't that the beginning of an economic rejuvenation of this otherwise?
That's what development is about, Bob, and that's what higher living standards and all the rest of it. We have the capability here, I believe, to become a model of development. We can take a population that everybody has theoretically dismissed, and we can turn it around into a productive, dynamic situation of growth and development where employers would be competing with each other to come in here and access a workforce with these kinds of attitudes and these kinds of skills. But what we have got to do, we need champions. We need people to go out there and praise and sing the glories of the value of education, not compromise standards, the toughest damn standards we can possibly ask people to meet.
And not to be a nattering nabob of negativity or anything, you're not going to get that from somebody who's out there hooting and screeching against Common Core, are you?
No. No, you are not. Bob, there's a video, there's a video on YouTube by George Carlin. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's a stick that he does on education and cognitive thinking, critical thinking, and cognitive skill building, and those kinds of things. And it's absolutely dynamic. And he said, basically, this is a club. He's talking to the audience. And he said, this is a club, and you guys ain't in it.
And you're not going to be invited.
And you're not invited. And that's really the issue. George Carlin pinpointed this issue long ago. And, of course, he's hilarious. The way he presents it is hilarious. But the issue itself is frightening. So what I've done in this morning's in the piece that I put together this morning is I tried to make the point. Well, I mean, let me rather than paraphrase my own words, let me give you my own words. I quoted James Madison, and we've quoted this before. He says that a popular government without popular information or the means of acquiring it is but a prologue to a farce or a tragedy, or perhaps both. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power that knowledge gives. My conclusion is, this is what I've said, Southern West Virginia has become the fulfillment of Madison's dire prediction of both farce and tragedy. Farce, because we've let ourselves fall into the trap of believing that knowledge was for other people. We didn't need it because the minds were all we'd ever need. Tragedy, because now we need the power which knowledge gives, and we don't know how to go about getting it anymore. Our people are in danger of losing their talents for self-help. And basically what I'm saying is our people have fallen victim to the way they've been treated. In other words, they have been exposed to lowered expectations, and they've met them. And when they meet them, they get even lower. And we've got to turn that around. And we've got to look at our educational institutions to do it. But as long as their priority is to protect the reputation and the credibility of the institution, it can't serve the people that taxpayers are funding these institutions to serve. The irony of all of this about going out of the state and recruiting people from outside, buying lists of potential students is that the taxpayers of West Virginia are paying for this. We're the ones that are paying for the scholarships. We're the ones that are hiring the admissions recruiters. We're hiring people with our money to go out and find people who will enroll in our colleges in order to sustain them and protect the jobs that are currently in them, rather than using the money we're paying in taxes to educate our own people or to try to educate our own people. I realize that some people will be very, very limited in terms of what they're able to do. But at least we'll know that, and they'll know that, and all of us can begin to act accordingly. But to just administer a standardized test to somebody that doesn't even know where it comes from or how it's being used, not take it seriously, and then that results of that test becomes the basis for throwing you into a junk heap somewhere as a person who's not eligible for education, not educable, as they say. We've got to turn that around, I believe. And I believe we can do it. I know that we can do it. We've got the talent and the skills to do it. I mean, I know that if I had a group of students in a class for a given period of time, say a month or 2 months, I could guarantee you that I could get 3/4 of those people to do a creditable performance on the ACT exam. I know it. And it wouldn't be giving away the questions either. The measurement of education is a game. It's a very serious game, but it's a game. There's a way to play it, and our people don't know how. Our people don't know how to play the game. The children of the few of certain particular families do. They take prep courses and courses, very expensive program courses by Kaplan and some of these other private deliverers of test preparation, so that their performance on these standardized tests will be stellar. Most of our kids don't have access to those advantages. So basically, our kids walk in to take a standardized test that's going to determine literally how they live for the rest of their lives. And they don't know what to expect. They don't know where the questions are coming from. They don't understand what the questions are looking for. They don't understand what the essays they're being asked to write are designed to show. In other words, they have no idea how the game is played. Consequently, they become victims. In education's game of musical chairs, these are the ones that don't have the chairs. No matter how long the music plays, and no matter how many times around them you parade, when the music stops, you can almost predict absolutely which students will not be able to find a chair. And we have got to reverse that. This region demands that we reverse that. And it seems to me that the fact that we have had high quality, and I say this, in credit to these institutions, we have high quality institutions that have been operative in this region for more than 100 years. But the fact of the matter is, if you drive 1 mile away from the campuses where they are located, you'd never know that there was a college or a university within 100 miles. Because these institutions have had almost no impact on the regions in which they're located. They've done a great job in recruiting quality, talented people and educating those people and sending them out into the world as competent competitors. But what that has meant is that we have cherry-picked our talent, developed it, and then sent it elsewhere rather than keeping it here. The result is that this region is reeling. And now that coal is reaching it has reached its maximum, and it's on the downslide. The entire region is spinning downward with it because there really is no alternative. All the alternatives have left. They've never been welcomed in the first place. And we've got to begin to churn that around. And it seems to me we need to look to our education institutions to do it. Let me seem to be kind of on a roll here, and I don't mean to. Let me share with you some specifics here. And one of them that I think is important to recognize is the difference between for-profit institutions and not-for-profit institutions. Private institutions, for the most part, as opposed to public. By definition, a private institution, a for-profit institution, is answerable to shareholders, to stockholders. It must show a profit because its operation is dependent on the revenue that comes in from high tuition rates and from foundation donations from successful alumni and things like that in order to build up endowments. What I'm saying is that for-profit institutions, by definition, have to make the security and the future of the institution a priority, because that's what generates the profit. Consequently, the bottom line, quarterly reports, those kinds of things become vital to for-profit institutions. But public institutions ought to be different. Public institutions traditionally have been taxpayer funded. Their very creation and existence are testimony to the decision that the need for public higher education is a public good. It is in the public interest. The entire population of our state will benefit from the existence of these institutions. Therefore, it's legitimate that our public tax money go to support them. But unfortunately, that's not what's happened. Most of our public institutions operate like they were private. The institution becomes the priority, not the reason it was created. And justifying the public expenditure of tax money in the budgets for these institutions becomes almost a game. Because the expenditure of public money does not drive the institution. The institution drives itself according to its own priorities. What I've said is that what we need is a mix of public and private, for-profit and non-profit institutions, but a different mix. We need the public service priorities of public institutions, but in them we need dedicated educators who are willing to reinvest the revenues generated back into education rather than into administrative salaries and quarterly returns to investors. In other words, the size of the public institution's endowment ought not to get so large that it becomes an embarrassment. What that means is its revenue is not going into education. It's going into the sustaining of the institution. This region, I've argued, demands programs to serve all of its citizens, not simply the brightest among them. It's clear from statements by leaders of our current colleges and universities that the future of their institutions remain their priority. They readily admit to a willingness to go further and further to recruit qualified students. That says it all. For years, our colleges have sent recruiters far and wide to bring in students from elsewhere. Those who graduate leave the area, and our taxes pay for it. There are plenty of prospective students right here. What we need is an institution that will serve them. If they're not yet qualified, bring in the resources to get them there. Maximize technology. Use it to deliver services to where students are. Organize local community education forums. Introduce creative, customer-sensitive scheduling. Utilize standardized tests, not to determine eligibility for service, but to measure student progress after that service has already been rendered. Maximize seat time in class for assistance and learning, non-class time and technology for content delivery. Don't spend valuable learning time in the classroom delivering content. Excuse me. Technology. One second. I got so carried away I knocked my earphones right off, my microphone right off my earphones, and I apologize for that. Let's see, where was I? We need to maximize seat time in class for learning and assistance, not the delivery of content. We need to involve industry, the leaders of industry, and employers in developing curriculum. Those are the people that know what our graduates need to know. We need to ask them to help us define it and incorporate it into the classes we teach. We need to turn the region's lower paid work sites into guided educational laboratories and institutes. We need to reinvigorate the whole idea, the old idea of cooperative education. We need to turn work into a learning experience, a supervised learning experience, so that students can begin to appreciate the connection between what they learn in the classroom and what they're asked to apply in the world outside the classroom. We need to develop students who are comfortable with the back and forth, learning and doing, and the connection between the two. We need to fashion master's degrees around the career needs of working professionals who know exactly what they need. We don't need master's programs where working professionals in the field come in and we tell them what they need. If they're working in a field, they know what they need. And it may not be what we have included in our programs. We need to tailor our graduate degree programs to the particular needs of students. They know what they need. They come to us with a wealth of knowledge and experience. And they come to us because they believe we can help them grow that wealth of experience and knowledge. We need to ask them what it is they want from us. We need to go out into the field and find the people who can deliver it. If we do this, if we begin to show people how important education is, if we need to convince people that we know how important they are, not only to themselves and to their families, but to the region in which all of us live, we can turn the situation around. Bottom line, we need higher education driven by the needs of the region, not the priorities of the institution that exists there. We have the potential to turn the region away from the farce tragedy reality that James Madison introduced to us into an innovative, dynamic model for a relationship between employer and higher education, between the world of work and the world of knowledge, between the classroom and the workplace, and turn all of that into a new, exciting process driven totally by what works for people. If you were to ask me, this is probably the piece of writing that means as much to me personally as anything I've ever written, because I believe in it so passionately. I went into education for the same reason that most people go into education, because I believed that I had something to offer people and I wanted an opportunity to deliver it. I left teaching when I retired 2 years ago, still committed to those same goals, to those same objectives. One of the reasons that I wanted to engage in the virtual center, in these programs, these regular programs, is because I believed that I had the capability to put things together that people not only ought to know, but needed to know. And I saw this as an opportunity to make that happen. I believe that, I am sitting here in southern West Virginia right now in a region which is undergoing the kinds of pains and the kind of angst about which direction to go in. I believe the capability is here to turn it around and make it work for the entire area. But I think there's a little bit or a lot of looking in the mirror that has to take place. I think many folks who will be instrumental in making these things happen have to look critically at what they do and what they believe and act accordingly. And I'm not really sure that that is going to happen. Not unless some sort of pressure is brought to bear in order to make those things happen. And I guess at this point in my life, that's kind of where I've ended up. Maybe, if nothing else, I've become a source of pressure. But be that as it may, this is one I believe in. I believe firmly in. And I really believe that we don't, in this country, we don't have the best higher education system in the history of the world for nothing. But as a republic, we have committed ourselves to give all of our citizens, not just a few of them, access to the potential of that higher education capability. And up to this point, we've not fulfilled our commitments and our responsibilities. I think it's time we did that. I don't believe that we can continue doing business as usual and expect different results. We have an economy here that is languishing. We have the principal industry that has driven and literally guided and dominated the region for generations on what appear to be its final legs. We know that that industry is going to be fine because the people at the top, the people who run it, when the profit is gone, they'll leave. But in the process, they will leave people who can't leave. They will leave people without jobs, without hopes, without opportunity, without dreams, without anything. It seems to me right now we are in the process of making the kinds of decisions necessary to deal with those eventualities. It is my belief, it is my hope that they'll address those responsibilities wisely. If today's program has been a little bit more personal than it ought to have been, then I take responsibility for that. But I hope it has value. And I thank all of you who are out there for your patience and for your support. We will have another program tomorrow here at the Virtual Center. I do invite you to join us. Tomorrow's program will be at our regular time, which is 1/2 hour earlier than today. It'll be 1 p.m. in the East. I want to thank every one of you for listening today. I invite you to join us tomorrow. Please have a wonderful evening. Be safe. Be good to each other. And thank you for supporting the Head On Radio Network and the Virtual Center. This is Bill O'Brien. Have a good day. Thank you.